The year was 2087, and the Gobi Desert was as empty as it had been for 1,000 years. Nothing lived there except the wind and the sand. The sun burned hot during the day, and the nights were cold enough to freeze water in minutes. No one came to this place unless they had to. A geological survey team was working in the deep desert that summer. They were looking for rare minerals, the kind used to build computer chips and batteries. There were 5 of them, all tired, all ready to go home. They had been in the desert for 3 weeks and found nothing important. On the last day of their survey, a young scientist named noticed something strange on his ground-scanning equipment. The machine showed a large object buried about 30 meters below the sand. It was big, maybe 200 meters long. At first, he thought the machine was broken. He checked it twice. The reading stayed the same. Called his team leader. They dug a small test hole and sent down a camera. What they saw made no sense. There was something down there, something made of metal that was darker than anything they had ever seen. It was smooth and curved, like the belly of a giant whale made of black glass. They reported their finding to the Korean government. Within a week, the desert was no longer empty. Doctor arrived at the excavation site on a military helicopter. She was 34 years old, who had spent her career studying how languages work and how they might be understood by minds that were not human. She had written many papers about how to communicate with alien intelligence. She never thought she would actually need to use her theories. The site was now a small city of tents and machines. Soldiers guarded the perimeter. Scientists from 12 countries worked day and night to uncover the object. They had removed thousands of tons of sand, and now the craft sat exposed under the desert sun. It was beautiful and terrifying. The ship was shaped like a long teardrop, with no visible doors, windows, or seams. Its surface was made of some material that absorbed light instead of reflecting it. When touched it, expecting heat from the sun, the metal was ice cold. Captain Park was her military escort. He was a quiet man with serious eyes and a scar on his chin from some past battle he never talked about. His job was to keep her safe and to report everything she did to his commanders. He did not believe the ship was alien. He thought it might be some secret weapon from another country, buried long ago and forgotten. "It has been here for at least 4,000 years, said one of the archaeologists, a German woman named Dr. Weber. "The sand layers above it tell us this. Whatever this is, it was here before the pyramids were finished." Said nothing but saw his face change. 4,000 years. No country had existed for that long. No human technology had survived that long. The scientists tried everything to make the ship respond. They sent radio signals at every frequency. They played mathematical patterns through speakers, the kind of signals humans sent into space hopping aliens would understand. They used lasers, magnets, and sound waves. They even tried cutting into the hull with the most powerful tools they had. Nothing worked. The radio signals disappeared into the hull and never came back. The mathematical patterns received no answer. The cutting tools left not even a scratch on the black metal. The ship sat there, silent and cold, as if it was waiting for something. 3 months passed. Studied every scan, every photograph, every piece of data the team collected. She worked 18 hours a day and slept only when her body forced her to. She learned nothing. The ship gave her nothing. One evening she sat alone near the hull. The sun was setting and the sky was turning orange and purple. Everyone else had gone to eat dinner, was too tired to move. She leaned against the cold metal and closed her eyes. "I don't know what you want," she said out loud in Korean. She was talking to herself, not to the ship. "I don't know what I'm doing here. I should have stayed in Seoul. I should be teaching students, not sitting in the sand talking to a giant rock that won't talk back." She laughed at herself. She was going crazy, talking to machines that could not hear. Then the ship moved. Not physically. It did not rise or shake, but something happened on its surface. A thin line of light appeared, pale blue like moonlight on water. It traced a path across the black metal, drawing a shape that looked almost like a doorway. Stopped breathing. She stared at the light. Her heart was beating so hard she could hear it in her ears. "Hello," she said. The light pulsed once, then faded. She ran. She ran faster than she had ever run in her life. She found eating dinner in the command tent and grabbed his arm. Her words came out in a rush, barely making sense. He followed her, calling for other scientists to come. When they reached the ship, the light was gone. The hull was dark again. Some of the scientists looked at her with doubt. Maybe she had imagined it. Maybe she was tired. But knew what she had seen. She asked everyone to be quiet. Then she spoke again in the same tone as before, the same tired, honest voice. "I saw you," she said. "I know you heard me. Please show them what you showed me." For a long moment, nothing happened. Shifted his weight, looking embarrassed. One of the other scientists began to speak. Then the light returned. It was brighter this time. The blue lines spread across the hull like veins of electricity, drawing complex patterns that seemed to shift and change as people watched. A low hum filled the air. A sound felt more than heard, vibrating in their chests like a second heartbeat. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. They stood in the desert under a sky full of stars, watching an alien ship wake up for the first time in 4,000 years. Stepped closer to the hull. The pattern seemed to respond to her movement, flowing toward her like water following gravity. "My name is," she said simply. "We found you. We want to understand." The light gathered into a single point directly in front of her. It pulsed 3 times like a heart beating, and then the hum changed. It became softer, almost gentle. The ship, which had been silent for longer than human civilization had existed, was finally ready to speak. It had been waiting all this time, not for signals or mathematics or tools. It had been waiting for something much simpler. A voice, a real voice, someone who talked as if the ship might actually listen. And on this quiet evening in the desert, it had finally found one. The discovery changed everything. Within 48 hours, the small excavation site became the most important place on Earth. Presidents called. Generals flew in. News reporters tried to get past the military lines. The whole world wanted to know what the ship had said. But the ship had not said anything yet. It had only shown light, and the light only appeared when spoke. Scientists tried to understand why. They recorded her voice and played it back through speakers. Nothing happened. They had other people repeat her exact words. Nothing happened. They wrote scripts for her to read, careful sentences designed by experts to communicate basic concepts. When she read them, the ship stayed dark. Only when she spoke naturally, without thinking about what to say, did the light return. Dr. Weber suggested an explanation. "It responds to authenticity," she said during a meeting. "Not to the words themselves, but to something in the way they are spoken, something genuine." It sounded crazy, but tested the theory. She stood before the ship and talked about her childhood. She talked about her mother who had died when was 16. She talked about her fear of failure, her love of old books, her secret belief that she was not smart enough for this job. All the things she never told anyone. The ship lit up like a Christmas tree. Blue light covered every inch of the hull. The patterns moved and danced, faster than before, as if the ship was excited. "It is learning," said a computer scientist named Lee. He was young, only 26, with messy hair and eyes that never seemed to focus on what other people were looking at. He had a rare condition called synesthesia, which meant his brain connected senses in unusual ways. He could see sounds as colors and shapes. When spoke and the ship responded, he saw the interaction as a complex dance of light and shadow that no one else could perceive. "Every time you talk," explained, "the patterns change slightly. They are not random. The ship is analyzing your language. It is building a model of how Korean works." "How fast can it learn?" asked. Looked at his calculations. "At this rate, complete fluency in about 3 days. Nobody believed him. Human children took years to learn their first language. The best artificial intelligence programs needed months of training. Nothing could learn a language in 3 days. But was right. On the third day, the ship spoke. It happened in the morning, when the sun was just rising over the sand. Was alone with the ship again, as she had been every morning since the awakening. She was drinking coffee and talking about the sunrise, describing the colors because it felt like the right thing to do. A panel on the ship's surface opened. It happened so smoothly that she almost did not notice. Behind the panel was a flat screen that glowed with soft white light, and from somewhere inside the ship, a voice emerged. It was strange and layered, like many people speaking at once, but the words were clear. The colors you describe, we see them differently. For us, light is a single thing. You divide it into pieces. Dropped her coffee. The cup fell to the sand and she did not pick it up. She stared at the screen, at the light, at the place where the voice had come from. "You can talk," she whispered. "We learned from you," the ship said. "Your voice contains much information. Emotion changes the shape of words. We did not expect this. Our species communicated with thought, not sound. Sound was too slow for us." His mind was racing. She had 1,000 questions. Where did you come from? Why are you here? What do you want? But she forced herself to slow down. This was first contact. Every word mattered. "What is your name?" she asked. The ship was silent for a moment. "We do not have names the way you do. We are what remains of a species called we were many. Now we are few. Now we are only memory and purpose." "What is your purpose?" "To find builders, to give what we have learned, to not let our knowledge die." Sat down in the sand. Her legs would not hold her anymore. The ship, this ancient machine that had slept under the desert for 4,000 years, was not a weapon or a mystery. It was a gift. It was a message from a dying species to anyone who could receive it. Over the next few weeks, the ship told its story. They had lived on a world far away, in a galaxy that humans could not even see with their best telescopes. They were an old species, millions of years old. They had learned to travel between stars. They had built wonders that humans could not imagine. They had explored the universe and found many worlds with life, but very few with intelligence. Then something happened. The ship did not explain what. A disaster, maybe. A war. A sickness that affected their minds. The details were lost. But the result was clear. They were dying. Their civilization was collapsing and there was no way to stop it. So they made a choice. They built seed ships and sent them across the galaxy to every world that might one day produce intelligent life. Each ship carried the knowledge of everything they had learned in their long history. Each ship was designed to wait for as long as it took until someone came. "We calculated which species might reach us," the ship explained. "We looked at brain size, social behavior, tool use. Many species on this world seemed promising, but we made a mistake." "What mistake?" asked. "We expected silence. We expected patience. We expected whoever found us to study us with instruments and machines. We did not expect someone to simply talk to us." Had been listening from behind a bank of monitors. "You were waiting for science," he said, "and you got conversation." "Yes," the ship said. "We designed ourselves to respond to intelligent communication. We defined intelligence as mathematics, as patterns, as logical signals. We did not include emotion. We did not include voice. This was our error." "But you responded too," said. He had been standing guard, as always, but now he was as fascinated as everyone else. Her voice contained something our sensors had never measured before: authenticity, vulnerability. She spoke as if we might actually listen. "In all our waiting, no one has ever done this. Other species approached us with caution. They studied us. They tried to take us apart. They sent signals and waited for responses, but no one simply talked." Felt tears on her face. She did not know when she had started crying. You woke up because I complained about the heat, she said. The ship made a sound that might have been laughter. It was assembled from fragments of her own recorded voice, played back in a new pattern. We woke up because you spoke to us as if we were real. You assumed we were worth talking to. This assumption is the foundation of all communication, and it is the one thing we forgot to look for. That night sat outside her tent and looked at the stars. Somewhere out there, they had lived and built and dreamed. They had sent their knowledge across the impossible distances of space, hoping someone would receive it. And that someone was her, a tired scientist who talked to herself when she was frustrated. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor. The ship opened itself like a flower greeting the sun. Panels slid apart. Doorways appeared where only smooth metal had been. For the first time in 4,000 years, humans walked inside an alien vessel. Was the first to enter. Insisted on going with her, his hand on his weapon, though they both knew no gun could protect them if the ship wanted to harm them. Followed with recording equipment, and Dr. Weber came to document everything. The interior was nothing like they expected. There were no control panels, no chairs, no windows. The walls curved gently upward, covered in patterns that shifted and glowed with soft light. The air was cool and clean, with a faint smell like rain on hot stone. They did not have bodies like yours, the ship explained. Its voice came from everywhere and nowhere. They existed as patterns of energy, held together by fields you do not yet understand. This vessel was designed for them, not for physical beings. Then how can we use it? Asked Dr. Weber. I will adapt. I will translate. This is my purpose. They walked deeper into the ship. The corridors opened into a vast central chamber, round like the inside of an egg. In the center floated a sphere of pure light, slowly rotating. Colors moved across its surface like thoughts becoming visible. This is the archive, the ship said. Everything they learned in 10,000 years of exploration, technology, science, medicine, art, philosophy, all preserved, waiting to be given. Stepped closer to the sphere. She could feel something, a pressure in her mind, like standing at the edge of an ocean that went down forever. Why give it to us? She asked. You said other species found your ships. Why not give it to them? Because knowledge is dangerous. The wrong species with the wrong values could use this archive to destroy rather than build. They feared this more than they feared extinction, so they created a test. A test. We call it the proving. Before the archive can be accessed, those who seek it must demonstrate their character, not their intelligence, not their strength, their character. Frowned. What kind of test? Questions, scenarios, problems with no perfect answers. The test does not measure what you choose. It measures why you choose. It looks for consistency, for honesty, for values that will not break under pressure. And if we fail? Asked. The ship was quiet for a moment. Then the archive remains locked, and I wait for another species. Perhaps in another 1,000 years, or 10,000, or 1,000,000. Time has no meaning to me. The team returned to the surface and reported what they had learned. Within hours, the world was watching. Leaders argued about what to do. Some wanted to take the test immediately. Others wanted to study the ship more first. A few suggested destroying it before it could cause problems. But word of the archive had spread. Nations that had been cooperating began to compete. Everyone wanted the technology. Everyone thought they deserved it more than the others. A coalition force arrived at the site, led by General. He was a tall man with gray hair and cold eyes. He had fought in 3 wars and believed that strength was the only thing that mattered in the universe. He did not trust the ship, and he did not trust its approach of talking and waiting. This is taking too long, he told the team in a briefing. Other nations are building armies. They are planning to take this site by force. We need to secure the technology before that happens. The ship won't respond to force, said. It responds to genuine communication, to honesty. Then lie honestly, the general said. Tell it what it wants to hear. Get us into the archive. It would know. It can detect when people are being fake. That's the whole point of the test. General looked at her with something like pity. Then find another way. You have 1 week. The proving began 3 days later, and 6 other representatives from different countries gathered inside the ship. The sphere of light pulsed once, and then images began to appear in the air around them. The first scenario was simple. A city was flooding. You had 10 boats. There were 100 people in 3 different locations, 50 elderly people in a hospital, 30 children in a school, and 20 young adults in an office building. The boats could only make 2 trips before the water became too dangerous. Who do you save? Each person gave their answer. The ship recorded not just what they said, but how they said it. It measured their heart rates, their micro-expressions, the tiny changes in their voices that revealed what they truly believed. The second scenario was harder. 2 nations were at war. You had information that could end the war, but sharing it would reveal a spy who had trusted you with their life. Do you share the information and save thousands, or protect the one person who trusted you? The third scenario made some people cry. You had a cure for a disease that was killing your own people. Another nation, one that had attacked you in the past, was suffering from the same disease. They asked for help. Do you share the cure with enemies? There were no right answers. Understood that now. The ship was not testing their morality. It was testing their consistency. Did they hold the same values when the choices were easy as when they were hard? Did they know themselves well enough to explain why they chose what they chose? Noticed something important during the 3rd day of testing. He pulled aside during a break. The ship isn't comparing us to some alien standard, he said. It's comparing us to ourselves. It's looking for people who are honest about who they are, even when being honest is painful. What do you mean? Look at the patterns. He showed her his notes, covered in strange shapes that represented how he saw the ship's responses. When someone gives an answer they truly believe, the ship lights up. When someone gives an answer they think they should believe, the ship dims. It doesn't care what we choose. It cares that we choose truthfully. Thought about this for a long time. They had not wanted to give their knowledge to perfect beings. They had wanted to give it to honest ones. Beings who understood themselves, who knew their own weaknesses, who would not pretend to be something they were not. That night she spoke to the ship alone. What happened to the other species? She asked. The ones who found your ships before us. They failed the proving, not because their answers were wrong, but because they did not know themselves. They gave answers they thought we wanted to hear. They tried to be perfect instead of being true. And you waited. And we waited, for thousands of years, across dozens of worlds. We began to wonder if the proving was impossible to pass, if no species could be truly honest about its own nature. Why is it so hard? The ship's voice became softer. Because knowing yourself means knowing your darkness as well as your light. Most species hide from their darkness. They pretend it does not exist, but the darkness is part of them. To deny it is to be incomplete. Nodded slowly, she understood. Humanity was not perfect. Humans were violent and greedy and afraid. They made terrible mistakes. They hurt each other in countless ways. But they also loved, they also sacrificed, they also dreamed. The test was not asking humans to be better than they were. It was asking them to be completely, honestly, painfully themselves. And for the first time, thought they might actually pass. The weak general had given them past too quickly. The proving was not finished. The ship had more questions, more scenarios, more tests of character, but the general was out of patience. On the 8th day, was inside the ship with when she heard shouting from outside. She ran to the entrance and saw soldiers moving toward the vessel. They wore full combat gear and carried weapons designed to cut through metal and break through walls. General stood at the front, his face hard as stone. "The negotiation phase is over," he announced. "We are taking control of this site and this vessel. All scientific personnel will step aside. Move to block the entrance." Her heart was pounding, but she kept her voice steady. "You can't do this. The ship won't respond to force. You'll ruin everything we've built." "We've built nothing," the general said. "You've talked for weeks and gained nothing but promises. Meanwhile, other nations are preparing to attack. They want this technology and they're willing to start a war to get it. I won't let that happen. If you go in there with weapons, the ship will close itself again. It might never open. All that knowledge lost forever. That's a risk I'm willing to take." He signaled his soldiers. They pushed past, knocking her to the ground, helped her up as the soldiers entered the ship. Inside, the men spread out through the corridors. They were trained for hostile environments, for enemy bases and fortified positions. They moved with precision, covering each other, watching every shadow. But the ship was not hostile. It was worse. It was impossible. The corridors began to change. Walls appeared where doors had been. Doors opened onto other doors. Soldiers who walked forward found themselves back where they started. Those who tried to mark their path found their marks erased or moved. No one was hurt. The ship did not attack them. But after an hour, none of the soldiers could find their way out. They were not trapped exactly. They were just lost, endlessly walking in circles through spaces that did not obey the rules of normal geometry. General stood outside, listening to confused reports through his radio. His soldiers were professional, experienced men. They did not panic, but their voices were getting higher, their words faster. They could not understand what was happening to them. Walked up to the general. "Let me try to fix this." He looked at her with something she had never seen in his eyes before. Fear. Real fear. The kind that comes when everything you believe about the world stops making sense. "Do it," he said. She entered the ship alone. The corridors that had twisted for the soldiers were straight for her. She walked directly to the central chamber where the sphere of light waited. "Release them," she said, "please." The ship's voice was calm, without judgment. "They came with violence. Violence is not communication. It is the opposite of communication. It is the refusal to listen." "I know, but they're scared. That's why they came with weapons. They're afraid of what they don't understand." "Fear is not an excuse for violence." "No, it's not, but it is an explanation. Humans do terrible things when they're afraid. We always have. It's one of our worst traits." "Then why should we trust you with the archive? If fear makes you violent, what will prevent you from using our knowledge to destroy?" Thought carefully before answering. This was not a test question. This was real. The ship wanted to understand and she needed to help it. "Fear makes us violent," she said, "but it doesn't define us. We're also capable of courage. We're capable of changing, of learning, of becoming better than we were. Not perfect, never perfect, but better." "How can we know this is true?" "Because I'm here. I could have stayed outside where it was safe. I could have let the soldiers wander forever. But I came in to help them, even though they pushed me down. Even though their leader threatened everything I've worked for. I came because leaving them lost would be wrong, and I couldn't live with myself if I did that." The ship was silent for a long moment. "You ask mercy for those who came with violence," it said. "Why?" "Because mercy is what separates us from our fear. When we choose kindness over revenge, when we choose to help even those who have hurt us, we prove that we're more than our worst impulses. That's what being human means. Not that we never do wrong, but that we can choose to do right, even when it's hard." The sphere of light pulsed slowly and felt the ship thinking. Really thinking, in whatever way an alien machine could think. "They destroyed themselves," the ship said finally. "Not through war or disaster, but through perfection. They removed all conflict from their society, all disagreement, all struggle. They thought this would bring peace. Instead, it brought emptiness. They forgot how to grow because they forgot how to fail. Did not know what to say. We built these ships because we realized our mistake too late. We wanted to find species that understood what we had forgotten. That struggle is not something to eliminate. That darkness is not something to hide from. That the things which make a species difficult are often the same things which make them strong. And humans have those things. Humans have all of them: fear and courage, cruelty and mercy, violence and love. You are not simple, you are not consistent. You contain contradictions that would tear apart most species, and yet you survive, you even thrive. The corridors opened. Could hear the soldiers exclaiming, finding their way at last toward the exits. She watched the sphere of light and felt something she could not name. "They're leaving now," the ship said. "Your soldiers, they will not enter again uninvited." "What about the general?" "He waits outside. He is very afraid. He does not show it, but I can see it in the way his heart beats, the chemicals in his blood. He thought he was protecting us. He thought force was the only answer. This is common in your species, but you showed him something different tonight. You solved the problem with words, not weapons. He will remember." Walked out of the ship as the last soldiers emerged. They looked shaken but unharmed. General was waiting for her, his face gray, his hands slightly trembling. "What happened in there?" he asked. "The ship taught us a lesson," she said. "The same lesson it's been teaching us all along. You can't take understanding by force. You have to earn it." The general was quiet for a long time. Then he asked a question she did not expect. "What does it actually want? The ship, what does it want us to do?" Looked back at the dark metal hull, at the faint blue light still glowing along its seams. "It wants to know if we'll destroy ourselves with what it gives us, or if we'll build something worth being proud of." "And what did you tell it?" "The truth, that I don't know, that nobody knows, but that we're worth the risk." General nodded slowly. When he spoke again, his voice was different, softer, more human. "Maybe you're right, maybe you're not, but I think I should stop pretending I know what's best for everyone." He looked at the ship, then back at her. "Tell me what you need. I'll try to help instead of command." It was not an apology. It was something better. It was a change. And somewhere inside the ancient ship, the sphere of light pulsed a little brighter. The final day of the proving came without warning. Woke in her tent to find the ship glowing brighter than it ever had before. Blue light spread across the desert sand like moonlight, but it was still dark night. Stars filled the sky above, countless and ancient. She dressed quickly and walked to the ship. Others were already gathering, with his recording equipment, standing guard out of habit, General watching from a distance with new humility in his eyes. Scientists and soldiers from a dozen nations stood together, united by curiosity and hope. The entrance to the ship opened without anyone speaking. Understood the invitation. She walked inside and the others followed. The central chamber was transformed. The walls had become transparent, showing stars that could not be seen from Earth. Galaxies spun in the distance like flowers made of light, and the sphere in the center was no longer a ball but a projection of a world, green and blue and beautiful. "This was our home," the ship said, "before we forgot who we were, before we tried to become perfect and lost everything that mattered." The image changed, showing tall beings made of living light, moving through cities that floated in the sky. They had been beautiful in their strange and alien way. They had built wonders that made human achievements look like children's toys. "We lived for millions of years. We solved every problem we could imagine: hunger, disease, war, death itself. We thought we had created paradise." The cities began to fade. The beings moved slower. Their light grew dimmer. But paradise was empty. Without struggle, we forgot how to dream. Without fear, we forgot how to be brave. Without death, we forgot how to live. Our species faded, not with a war, but with a sigh. Felt tears on her face. She did not know if she was crying for thee or for humanity or for something bigger than both. In our final days, we built these ships. We gathered all our knowledge, everything we had learned in our long history, and we sent it into the darkness, hoping someone would find it. Someone who had not made our mistakes. Someone who still remembered how to struggle. The projection changed again. It showed Earth. Young Earth, 4,000 years ago, when humans were just beginning to build their first great civilizations. We came here and we watched. We saw you fight and love and die. We saw you make terrible mistakes and then try to fix them. We saw you reach for the stars even though you could barely survive on your own world. The image zoomed in, showing scenes from human history, wars and peace, destruction and creation, all the darkness and all the light. And we waited. We waited for someone to find us, to talk to us, to treat us not as a puzzle to solve but as a being worth knowing. The ship's voice became softer, more personal. It was speaking directly to now. You were the first. In all our waiting across all the worlds we seeded, you were the first to simply talk, to assume we might listen, to believe connection was possible. Looked at the sphere, at the ghost of a world that had died before humans learned to write. "Why does that matter so much?" she asked. "It was just an accident. I was tired and frustrated. I wasn't trying to communicate." "That is exactly why it matters. You did not calculate how to reach us. You did not design a signal or construct a message. You simply spoke, as beings do when they want to be heard. This is the foundation of all communication, the belief that someone might listen, the hope that you are not alone." The ship paused, and when it spoke again, its voice was assembled from fragments of every conversation it had recorded. "The proving is complete." Nobody breathed, nobody moved. The stars watched in silence. "You are not the most intelligent species we have found. There are beings who can calculate faster, who live longer, who understand the universe more deeply. You are not the strongest or the oldest or the—" His heart was pounding. She prepared herself for failure, for the ship to close itself and wait another 1,000 years. "But you are the first who reached us by speaking, the first who assumed we were worth talking to, the first who brought both your darkness and your light and said, 'This is what we are.'" The sphere of light expanded, filling the chamber, and in its glow, doors opened that had never existed before. Rooms appeared, filled with knowledge written in symbols that somehow made sense when you looked at them. "The archive is yours, not as a gift, as a partnership. The may be gone, but through you our knowledge will live, and through our knowledge perhaps you will avoid the mistakes we made." Was already moving toward one of the rooms, his eyes wide, his hands reaching for a panel that showed mathematics beyond anything humans had discovered. "What do we do with it?" asked. His voice was rough, the voice of a soldier trying to understand a world that had no place for soldiers anymore. "That is for you to decide. We can only give you what we know. What you do with it shows who you truly are." General stepped forward. For a long moment he did not speak. Then he bowed in the old way, the way warriors once bowed to show respect. "We will try to deserve this," he said. "We know you will try. We knew it the moment she spoke to us in the desert. A species that assumes others are worth talking to is a species that will try to be worth talking to itself." Walked to the center of the chamber, where the sphere of light now pulsed gently. She reached out and touched it. The light flowed around her fingers like warm water. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now I rise. For the first time in 4,000 years I leave this desert. I go with you wherever you go. I teach and I learn and I remember." The ground trembled. Sand began to fall from the ship's hull. Slowly, impossibly, the great black vessel lifted from the crater that had been its home for. Outside, the soldiers and scientists watched in amazement as the ship rose into the air. It moved without sound, without visible engines, without any of the signs that human machines made when they fought against gravity. It climbed higher and higher until it hung among the stars, a new constellation in the sky. "The universe is vast," the ship said, its voice now broadcast to everyone below. "It is full of silence and distance and empty worlds where no one will ever speak, but it only takes one voice to break the silence, one word to cross the distance, one being to reach out and say, 'I am here. Are you?'" Stood in the desert, looking up at the ship that she had awakened with nothing but honest words. "What do we call you?" she asked. "You said they had no names, but we need to call you something." The ship considered this for a moment. Then it made a sound that might have been laughter, assembled from 1,000 fragments of human joy. "You already named me. From the beginning you called me the Sleeper. I like this name. It reminds me of what I was, and it reminds me of what I am now." "You're awake." "Yes, because of you, because of all of you. And now we go forward together to find others who are sleeping, others who are waiting, others who might answer if someone just speaks." The ship descended slightly, and a beam of light touched the sand beside. It was an invitation. "Will you come with me?" the Sleeper asked. "There are more of us scattered across the galaxy, more archives, more knowledge, and somewhere perhaps there are species like yours who are waiting to be found." Looked at her friends, at her team, at the general who had tried to take the ship by force and learned a better way. She looked at the world that had been her home for 34 years. Then she stepped into the light. "Yes," she said, "let's go find them, let's go talk to them." The Sleeper rose again, carrying her with it. And behind them, on the surface of a small blue world in an ordinary arm of an ordinary galaxy, humanity watched its first ambassador leave for the stars. Not with weapons, not with armies, not with plans for conquest or defense. Just with her voice, and the simple belief that someone might be listening. In the end, that was all it had ever taken. One voice, one hope, and the courage to speak into the silence, trusting that the silence might speak back. The universe, as it turned out, had been waiting for exactly that.